This podcast is brought to you by the Maryland State Library Agency. The MSLA podcast features presenters from statewide youth programs, as well as learning opportunities for library staff and resources for patrons of the Maryland State Library for the Blind and Print Disabled.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us again for another LBPD Guest Hour. As always, I'm your host, Ashley Biggs, Marketing and Outreach Librarian for the Maryland State Library for the Blind and Print Disabled. And today I'm very excited to introduce Patti Dorn from the Maryland Insurance Administration. For those who don't know, the Maryland Insurance Administration is this Maryland state agency that regulates the business of insurance in the state of Maryland. They license the insurance companies, agents, brokers that do business here in Maryland, and they make sure those companies are following all of Maryland's laws, any federal laws that are applicable, and they make sure the insurance companies stay solvent, meaning that they have enough money to actually pay claims when they happen. Patti was so kind when I reached out to the insurance administration and said, hey, look, we've got a life insurance month coming up, and would somebody from your agency be interested in talking on mic about this? And she was like, yeah, I'll do it. And we got to have a nice little conversation. She's going to answer some basic questions about life insurance and how those kind of things work. And hopefully that will give everyone an idea of how to plan for their future. So Patti, welcome.
Thanks, Ashley. Happy to be here.
Oh, it's so exciting to see and hear from you again. I know how important life insurance is.
Definitely.
When I was way back when in undergrad, I was actually a life and health broker for Prudential.
Oh, okay. All right.
So I got to learn all the cool terminology, but this was in Delaware back in the early aughts. I should say 2 aughts, because if you say aughts, people go, "Oh, 1900." I'm like, there are still outstanding questions, though. It's not
Always.
Yeah, you can't just go and Google and get a straight answer.
Yeah, it can be complicated and it can be a challenge.
It can be. So I guess my first big question are, what are the key differences between term life insurance and whole life insurance? And how do people figure out what's the best option for them?
Yeah, no, that's a good one. So a whole life insurance policy generally provides coverage for the lifetime of the person with premiums that never increase. Whole life. With term life, there's usually a level premium, so like the same premium for a certain period of time. So you generally buy a term life policy in increments of 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, etc. And then in that period of time, there is no increase. Term life policies, they provide coverage for a term. Those terms, 5, 10, 20, 30 years, while whole life coverage is for life. Another difference, whole life insurance generally has a cash value, and term life insurance policies do not generate cash values. So to take a step back, whole life is considered a permanent life insurance product. So whole life is a subcategory of the permanent life insurance products. It's one of many designs of permanent life insurance. You might have heard of something like, you've probably heard of universal life insurance. You know your stuff. There's other examples of permanent life insurance. So I feel like another way to think about the question is, just because whole life is a subset of permanent life insurance, what's the difference between term life and permanent life? When you're shopping for life insurance, it's important to understand what you're buying. It's important to understand these differences. So anybody who's approaching the table looking to purchase a life insurance policy should understand the difference between permanent life and term. Again, term is a term, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, etc. And you generally have a level premium during the term. No cash value. You're not generating a cash value. Think of it like your auto insurance or your renter's insurance. You're paying for the insurance only. If you don't die during the term, there's no cash value and the policy just ends. Just like you'd think of, again, of your auto insurance or your homeowner's insurance. You're not expecting to get a cash value out of that or anything at the end. Permanent life insurance policies generate cash value. You've saved or you've invested part of your premium. That is literally part of the design of the product. But it doesn't necessarily mean that permanent life insurance is a better deal. People love the idea that they're saving the money and they're going to get something out of it, but you're paying for that savings component in your premiums. That savings component's not coming for free. So a person with the same health profile, someone in the same condition health-wise and age, will generally pay more in premiums for permanent life insurance for the same death benefit. And they're paying extra for the permanency of the product and the savings component of the product. That the decision to purchase a term policy versus whole life permanent policy is yours, an individual decision. Depending on a lot of variables, your financial situation, your insurance needs, and the Maryland Insurance Administration always suggests, especially if you don't have a comfortable understanding of this, to seek a financial advisor who considers your financial needs in this process.
That makes total sense because
Okay.
I remember back in the days, way back when, understanding when I was learning about cash value in policies and things like that, it seemed like a great deal,
Right.
but the premiums would skyrocket at certain points.
Right.
So yeah, I totally understand where it may not be financially advisable for someone who just needs the coverage, not the additional.
Yeah. And because it's more expensive, if you're a person who's buying life insurance because you have kids at home and you need $1 million, a whole life insurance policy might not realistically even be an option for you.
Right.
The savings component of it is going to make that premium more than is realistic, and you're going to be looking at a term policy. So those things matter, and just depends on your need, and it depends on what you're buying the health insurance for or life insurance.
Yeah, exactly. This kind of brings up the question and the idea of misconceptions about life insurance. Especially because you said, you mentioned yourself, you got to take a step back and look at permanent versus term. And I think we all kind of get caught up in the terminology, but there's misconceptions about life insurance. So what are some
Absolutely.
common misconceptions and how do I address them, or how do people address them?
Okay, well, we're addressing one now, and that's the common misconception that most life insurance products are similar. That's definitely not true. And as we discussed in the previous question, and as we just discussed, another misconception is that everyone needs life insurance. Some people get that message. I mean, of course, we know plenty of people that should have life insurance that didn't get the message that they should, but those people aren't probably listening to us right now. Some people think they always need it. Your need for life insurance varies with your age and your financial responsibility. And for a lot of people, a point can come in your life where life insurance may not be necessary. It might be entirely optional. You might be free of that expense. Another misconception, which we've discussed a little, that the permanent products are better because they have that cash value and that permanency. Again, that makes sense for some, but not for others. It depends.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish I could give you an easy answer, but we can't.
But you're right. People get hammered into the idea that they absolutely have to have life insurance. I mean, come on, we see those commercials aimed at people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Exactly.
Say,
Right.
is your family protected? When they
Right.
themselves may have everything set up financially anyway to cover
Right.
expenses and things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And they might be stretching themselves to purchase a product that they don't even need.
Exactly. Exactly. Let's talk a little bit about that. Let's say someone does buy a product and there's a whole process that goes into it from the ground up, and it's usually called underwriting. And the underwriting process has tons of different outcomes. It's not just it's a fun little game. How does that work, and what factors kind of influence the rates people pay?
Yeah. So with the underwriting process, the insurance company is assessing your risk to determine essentially if you're eligible for coverage, and if you are eligible for coverage, what premium are they going to charge you? So usually this involves you answering questions. You're going to answer questions about your health and your lifestyle, and this might include a medical exam. You may have to allow the insurance company access to your medical records as well.
Mm.
The variables that the insurance company is looking at, it's going to include your age, gender, your health, your lifestyle, whether or not you smoke. It could even include things such as your driving record and family medical history. So essentially, they're getting information from you. They are assessing your risk. It sounds a little dark. They're assessing how long they think you're gonna live. I mean, it's it's a little dark, but it's
But they
part of the
don't go on
job.
the internet and play with the death calculator, right? It's an actual process.
It's very much, yes. Yeah, yeah. They're not just Googling. They're gonna look into your situation. And again, they're gonna decide, do we want to insure this person? And if we do want to insure this person, what premium are we gonna charge them?
And that makes sense. I mean, they're taking on some risk, um,
Sure.
depending on what kind of policy person's buying, of course, changes the risk type. Um,
Mhm.
so, but it's nice to know that they're not just going to Google and typing in your date of birth and expectations. The Maryland Insurance Administration is a wealth of knowledge for people. Um, Are there specific Maryland regulations or consumer protection that residents should know about when they're going through the underwriting process, when they are purchasing life insurance?
Maryland does have we have a few laws that are related to life insurance, and I'll cover a couple of them. First, only a person with an insurable interest can purchase a life insurance policy on another in the state of Maryland. Um, which is, there are actually states in which a stranger can purchase a policy on your life, but thankfully Maryland is not one of them. Um, no life insurance gambling for us. So you need to have an insurable interest. Someone with an insurable interest is usually someone that will suffer a financial loss should you pass away. They have an insurable interest on your life. Another Maryland law is that after 2 years, a policy becomes incontestable. So that means the insurer can't contest it for any reason, except if you don't pay your premiums. So you got to pay your premiums. That's another law. And another one, anyone selling you life insurance in the state of Maryland, they need to have a license with the Maryland Insurance Administration. They have to be a licensed broker or agent. They get their license from us. You can look up and make sure that they are currently licensed with us. And just know that they have to take exams. They have to meet continuing education requirements, and they have to know your stuff. So if they're licensed by the state of Maryland, you can be assured that they've passed exams, they're taking continuing education, and they should be quite familiar with all of these life insurance products that they're talking to you about.
It, I I got my license in Delaware when I was selling insurance, and in Maryland, I had to submit proof that I had a license in another state. I had to
Yeah.
submit proof of my exams, and all that good stuff. I remember it was not an easy process to get a reciprocal license in Maryland. Yeah.
Yeah. And
And
that's a good thing.
no, 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 it's a great thing. It's an
Yeah.
absolute great thing. I think back to when insurance wasn't regulated and people would go door to door, selling insurance, and it would literally be just somebody coming up to your door saying, "Hey, I'm selling life insurance on behalf of XYZ company. Are you interested?" and they would fill out a little book and give you a couple pieces of paper if you agreed, and you would start sending in your premiums. But if for some reason that information didn't make it to where it was supposed to be, you passed
Mhm.
away, there was no proof that you had insurance. And
Mhm.
I remember that being a big stink in New York, um, because of people coming into the country in the 1940s and 50s buying life insurance, and the companies, it wasn't regulated very well. So
Mhm.
I appreciate the regulation.
And I've heard those stories as well, the door-to-door life insurance salespeople. A lot of people in the city still talk about that. They remember their parents and their grandparents paying for their life insurance like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, and, I think that in some ways that really taught the next generation that life insurance is important as well.
Oh, I absolutely agree. But now that that we have so many better ways of tracking and making sure the information gets to where it's supposed to be, it gets harder and harder to contest that you actually had the policy.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, that brings me to my next question, because as I just said, there were times where insurance companies didn't have nobody had proof that you bought the policy other than a couple of, canceled checks. And that's if you got your checks back. Uh, how can policyholders ensure that their beneficiaries receive payout without complications? I mean, not to say that there isn't ever going to be complications, but sometimes how do you cut through that red tape?
Yeah, no, great question. And it's a lot about record keeping, and that's on the part of the policyholder. So, straight up, insurers have billions of dollars in unpaid claims because no one has stepped forward for policies, even after the insurance company looks for beneficiaries, because they are required to do their due diligence and try to find the beneficiaries. So, it's important policyholders keep updated records. The lifetime of an insurance policy can definitely be a long time. Sometimes in the lifetime of that insurance policy, it's been sold to another insurer. Make sure that you keep your life insurance file updated with the most recent information that you receive from your insurance company. And also keep your address current with that insurance company. So that way they can communicate with you even after you've moved. Make sure that your beneficiaries or another trusted person know where to find this information and how to access it. So eventually, someone else is going to need to access this information and they need to know where it is and it needs to remain updated. And that is the easiest way to get on your way, smooth sailing. If all else fails with regards to your beneficiaries, the Maryland Insurance Administration, we help beneficiaries locate missing life insurance policies through the National Life Insurance Policy Locator tool. So there is a tool out there. They will do their due diligence and try to track down policies. So you do have a backup, but it's good to just make sure that you keep your ducks in a row with regards to the paperwork for your life insurance policies for the sake of your beneficiaries, whom that's why you purchased the policy.
Yeah, definitely. It's always good practice to keep everything up to date. Let's just be honest.
Let's be honest, it's not always easy. You
No, it's
know,
not. It's not.
I mean, some days that paperwork can overwhelm us, but there's always that corner of your desk where if you have to read it, if you need to file it, and if today's not the day, have a little corner of your desk where every 30 days you get to it. Just get to
Right.
it.
You
Don't
gotta
throw it in
get
the trash.
to when we're going through our policy and we get our packet from the insurance company, you're right. It's a lot of information to keep track of. But consumers really do need to look it over. And I'm sure there's very fine print when trying to review that policy, especially as they're updating their information. So, what should consumers look for in that fine print when reviewing their policy?
Well, you definitely need to read it. Make sure you're reading it and make sure you're understanding your policy. And even before this, don't ever purchase a life insurance policy that you don't understand. If you're talking with that agent or the broker and they may genuinely know and believe that this is the best policy for you, but you're like, I'm still not sure what's going on, but I'll believe you. Make sure that you do not purchase a policy you don't understand. Some of these permanent life insurance policies have complicated investment components. Those are great for some, hard to understand for many. Make sure you understand what you have. Make sure you look at anything that they've updated you in the mail, regarding any changes to the policy, etc. Remember that a policy becomes incontestable after 2 years. So I mentioned that earlier. That's a law. After 2 years, they can't go back and question anything that you put on your application. However, remember, it is contestable in the first 2 years based on the statements that you made in your application. So make certain any and all information on your application is accurate, because the insurance company could push back on paying out your beneficiaries if you were to pass away in those first 2 years. Another thing about permanent life insurance policies, you might be looking at a policy that will be paid up for you at a certain age. So that's in your fine print. It says you're paid up at age 65, meaning that premiums are no longer required after maybe a certain age or a certain number of years. And that's amazing, but your cash value needs to be there to pay those premiums. So if you took out loans, etc., read the documents that you get from your insurance company because they might be saying, hey, yeah, you would have been paid up at 65, but you got that outstanding loan you got to pay back. So now it won't, you won't be paid up until you pay that money back. Those are the kinds of things that you need to look at, especially if you took out a loan against the cash value. Make sure that you stay up on your paperwork, pay that loan back, etc., if you want it to benefit you in the future by helping you pay future premiums. One other thing, and this is about a different kind of policy that we really haven't touched on, and those accidental death policies. This is oftentimes a life insurance policy. You get this information a lot of times from your bank. They'll sell you an accidental death and dismemberment policy for just a few dollars a month. Makes a lot of sense for some people. It could very much be part of your financial plan, but just remember that there are huge limitations with these policies. They usually do not cover deaths from natural or medical causes, so accidental death. Or if they do cover it for medical and natural causes, it's a small amount of money compared to the accident part. So just make sure that you understand what you're buying. I'm not discouraging anyone from these accidental death policies. Know what you're purchasing and understand what it pays out for different reasons. Read the fine print. I'm sorry.
I'm just thinking of a story I was told about those accidental death policies about a gentleman that I know who went on a tour of Europe. And while he was there, the tour company offered him an accidental death policy. It's a company based in the US, but
Uh-huh.
while he was touring, they were like, "Do you want this accidental in case you die, I guess, during through an accident on the tour, which
In
are you
case we kill you.
interested?" And it was like he goes, "It was like $300 for this policy that guaranteed if I died, I would, my family would get $10,000. It seems like a good." I'm like, what are your chances of having an accident?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. And that's kind of a high premium for the, low
the
payout
payout. Yeah.
amount too. So those are things to consider.
Well, and that actually brings me to my next thought because again, they're supposed to be regulated and licensed agents and companies. And here is the tour company going, "Hey, buy this life insurance from us," right? So there are risks to making purchases of life insurance from unlicensed agents or companies. What are those risks and how can a consumer verify legitimacy?
So the risk is that you purchase an unlicensed product, and the Maryland Insurance Administration would not have jurisdiction over enforcing that the company pay out. And so that is certainly the risk. You should verify that the agent and the insurance company is licensed. You can use the search option on our website. Our website is insurance.maryland.gov. So it's insurance.maryland.gov, and you can always just call us 1-800-492-6116. 1-800-492-6116 to talk directly to somebody from my agency.
Okay. So let's double back on this idea of borrowing against the cash value. You had mentioned that in how to make things smooth for your beneficiaries, and one of the things you said was, if you borrow against your cash value, pay it back, or otherwise they don't get that money. How does that really work? And under what circumstances might someone actually borrow against their life insurance?
So, yeah, as we discussed earlier, most of these permanent life insurance policies, which includes the whole life policies, contain a cash value component. So, you're building that cash value with each one of those payments that you make to the insurance company. The policies have a lot of different designs. Again, some you take an active role in choosing investments, and some are a lot simpler. Whole life is a relatively simple product. In general, when the cash value reaches a certain threshold, you can borrow against the policy. However, you need to pay that back, and you pay it back with interest in order to essentially um, hold your policy in the way in which it's designed, the way you want the death benefit to be paid out, et cetera. You need to pay back the loan, and you're paying it back with interest. Unpaid loans can reduce the death benefit, or even cause the policy to lapse. So, if your death benefit is $20,000, but you were owing the insurance company, you owe to pay back your loan, that could potentially reduce that death benefit for your beneficiaries. With regards to why someone would borrow against their cash value, for the most part, that decision would be on, yourself and your need to do so.
Probably another step in talking to a financial advisor if you're going to borrow against your cash value,
I agree.
you know, just throwing that one out there. you know, um, all of this sounds great. The idea of health insurance sounds absolutely great. Not health insurance, life insurance sounds absolutely great. But it is an industry that is constantly on the change, on the move. And, there are recent changes in economics and technology that have, impacted this industry. How has the life insurance industry adapted to those economic changes and tech changes? I mean, are we hitting that age of we're hitting that age of AI, right?
Right. Yeah, it's improving their information on their end. And they're trying to make it as easy for consumers to apply as possible on our end too, because we're starting to demand it more. Fewer and fewer of us are willing to, we're not going to be too happy if we get, a 10-page application in the mail these days. Although I did legitimately get one when I increased my life insurance amount.
Me too.
But, in this particular situation, they're still doing that. But a lot of these companies are going to make it so much easier. You can put an app on your phone. You can access information that you may have already downloaded on your phone. You're going to give them permission to access information that they can access electronically. And so it can just be a lot easier. There's a concept of accelerated underwriting. And so you give them a little bit of information, and they're able to get this done a lot faster than they have in the past. We can just access so much more information electronically now without, always turning to the old fashioned snail mail and requesting, etc. So it's, yeah, it's
Yeah,
definitely makes things quicker.
it does. It does. But there's of course there's always that concern because it does move a little fast
I
sometimes.
agree. Again, back to checking and making sure that the entities that you're working with are legitimate by reaching out to us. I think that'll give you a peace of mind. It won't give everyone a peace of mind, and there's always going to be people that are like, nah, no thanks on the app, and that's okay. I mean, absolutely. If you want to do it the old-fashioned way, um, because that's what works for your peace of mind, definitely talk to the insurance company, about snail mailing, for example, an application because that's what you're comfortable with.
Yeah, and um it's just funny. I've had the same car insurance company for 10 years, and I've had the same life insurance policy for 10 years. And when my daughter was born, I went to go increase it, and they sent me a mountain of paperwork in the mail.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
all this stuff. I'm like, can't I just go online and fill out a form? But okay. So the big thing is the Maryland Insurance Administration is here to help. That's what I really want people to walk away with. Maybe some tidbits about these life insurance things that are great. But I've had a chance to explore your website and the resources there. I know that you and others have done trainings that are recorded informational sessions that are available online. Overall, what resources does the Maryland Insurance Administration provide to help Marylanders navigate these options and resolve disputes? Because I'm sure there's someone somewhere that got the short end of the stick.
Absolutely. Sure. Yes. And you can always file a complaint with us. You go to insurance.maryland.gov, and right up there on the top on the left-hand side, it says file a complaint. And so when that happens, you can just follow that process and you can electronically file a complaint. Again, you can call the 800 number if you want them to mail you out a complaint form. You can do it by hand that way too. If again, you don't want to go through the process, or you don't have internet access, or this is not the way that you want to do things. You can always call our 800 number when you have questions. And if you want to talk to one of us, a Maryland Insurance Administration employee, about life insurance options, you can ask for the Consumer Education and Advocacy Unit. So I'm the Associate Commissioner of the Consumer Education and Advocacy Unit, and my team can talk to you about life insurance options. I think it's important to say that we can educate you on your life insurance options, but we are not licensed agents and we cannot give you personalized insurance advice.
That is very true. But I had the ability to go on your website and kind of read that it's fairness and about making sure that everyone is treated fairly and that all the laws are followed. So that's really important. And the consumer advocacy group, I think, is probably their best resource to get additional information before making financial decisions, besides
Yeah.
talking to a financial planner,
Yeah.
things like that.
And we have webinars available too. We have on the State of Maryland YouTube page, we've contributed shorter videos on life insurance, as well as entire webinars on the topic.
I'm just going to give your phone number one more time. So let me just make sure that because I have it pulled up here. It is 1-800-492-6116. And that website is insurance.maryland.gov. I want to thank you for being my insurance pal and answering some of these questions and introducing your agency to individuals who may not know that you are a well-kept secret. Um, we're a state agency. We understand being a well-kept secret. It's just like, really? All the education we do? I want to thank you for being here and being part of our outreach to the community. Because of the involvement of MIA, a lot of the policies that people do have and have good experiences with are shaped by what your organization is able to help with. And that as someone who will be a beneficiary of someone's insurance one day, and as someone who has a policy to make sure that she leaves something for her children, I appreciate the work you do. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashley. I very much appreciate that. It's been a lot of fun talking to you.
All right. Well, guys, this is the end of LBPD Guest Hour. Please join us again next month. For those who don't know, we do record a month in advance. So I hope, on my dreary spring day, by the time you're hearing this, it's a nice, beautiful spring day. May your May be filled with flowers. As they say, April showers bring May flowers. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you have yourself an excellent day, and I'll be in touch soon.
This podcast is brought to you by the Maryland State Library Agency. The MSLA podcast features presenters from statewide youth programs, as well as learning opportunities for library staff and resources for patrons of the Maryland State Library for the Blind and Print Disabled.